Hello everyone and welcome to the Daily Signal's Top 10, where we are taking a look at the top stories of the week, many of which were underreported or misreported by the mainstream media. I am Genevieve Wood and I'm joined by my Daily Signal colleagues, Jarrett Stepman and Jenny Montalbano. We are going to get started, folks, with a very heartbreaking story this week that you, I'm sure, all have been following. The story in Florida. The good news, if there is any out of this, is that heroes do emerge in these types of times, and one was a football coach at Parkland.
Absolutely, that's Coach Weiss. He wants to make sure everybody's safe before himself.
What do you hear happened to him?
I heard that he had used himself to shield other, I believe it was 3 females that were in the line of fire. He used his body.
So Jenny, there really is no good news out of something like this, but you do see good things happen even in the midst of all this evil, and one of them was this football coach.
Yeah, this football coach is an incredible man, an incredible human being. What a great person. He has passed away, but they have said multiple reports that he shielded and saved the lives of many students in that school. He sacrificed himself and took several bullets, and unfortunately, and very, very, very tragically, did not survive. But I think you make a good point. Heroes do exist, and it's important to highlight them.
Well, of course, the left is already quickly deciding that this is a debate over gun control. Let's take a look at that.
And so, hence the challenge for why it's so hard to find something that works. And there are a lot of proposals. And I'll share the ones because I've heard them before and I hear them today, and I'm not diminishing them. I don't want this to be taken as because it won't work, I don't even want to hear your argument. I understand, I really do. You read in the newspaper that they used a certain kind of gun, and therefore, let's make it harder to get those kinds of guns. I don't have some sort of de facto religious objection to that or some ideological commitment to that per se. There's all kinds of guns that are outlawed and weaponry that's outlawed and or a special category. The problem is we did that once, and it didn't work for a lot of reasons. One of them is there's already millions of these in the street. And those things, they last 100 years. And so you could pass a law that makes it hard to get this kind of gun in a new condition. But you're going to struggle to keep it out of the hands of someone who's decided that's what they want to use, because there's so many of them out there already that would be grandfathered in. You can do a background check. The truth is, in almost all these cases I cited, the individual either erroneously passed a background check or would have passed it or did. Again, even if they couldn't pass the background check, then they could buy them the way MS-13 does and other gangs and other street elements do from the black market. Again, not because we shouldn't have the background check. I'm just trying to be clear and honest here. If someone's decided I'm going to commit this crime, they'll find a way to get the gun to do it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have a law that makes it harder. It just means understand, to be honest. It isn't going to stop this from happening.
So this part of the story was completely predictable, Jared. This is always what happens. And the only difference is I think it almost gets faster now that people immediately jump to the gun control debate. But anything new in this latest round?
Yeah, you know, I think there's, yes, they've immediately jumped to try to, activists and politicians try to politicize an event like this right away. I think something maybe a little new is to see some networks actually starting to talk to the victims and start to question them on gun control policies, literally even before 24 hours have gone by since this event happened.
Including some of the students.
Including some of these young students who, frankly, I mean, you know, after such a horrible incident's taken place, should this person really be on camera discussing gun control policies and things like that? So, you know, I think that the media, look, they play into this firestorm. Every time we see one of these things, I mean, I do believe it kind of generates these copycats that we see that, you know, look, these shooters, they get a lot of publicity from these things, these monstrous acts. The media is very quick to jump aboard these things. And unfortunately, they also peddle a lot of, I would say, just phony statistics about guns and gun rights that have just been really pernicious that don't get corrected. I recently wrote a fact-checking piece, a top 6 facts that unfortunately have been media narratives that have been just flat out wrong. I mean, one in particular that just got everywhere, the very few journalists corrected, was that there have been 18 school shootings this year It was based on an activist anti-gun group. It is very misleading. It defines a school shooting as maybe a bullet from somewhere else happened to get onto campus and things like this. So there's a lot of disinformation out there after these incidents, and it's really too bad that they're used as kind of political platforms for this activist agenda that may have nothing to do with tackling violence like this in schools at all. So it is very disheartening to see this.
And Jenny, they completely ignore facts. I mean, it's fine to have this debate, but again, time and again, you look at cities, you look at jurisdictions, you look at states that have very strict gun control measures, Chicago being one, for example. We've all heard that one. And they simply don't work.
No, it doesn't. And you're right. They often ignore other sides to the story and the true facts. Like Jarrett was saying, the fact or the misinformation about the number of school shootings, Robin Roberts was promoting it just a couple of days ago. So in that regard, it's kind of shocking, but also, like we pointed out, there are several aspects to the story, and I think most notably right now, the FBI is admitting that they messed up. They didn't follow protocol. I mean, Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, has issued a strong statement. I mean, I was blown away reading it. There's major holes in this. This sounds like it definitely could have been prevented.
Let me ask you all, we've heard President Trump, when he came out and spoke to the nation the morning after, and he talked about really the mental illness aspect of this. But then you had Senator Cruz, who I thought called it quite well in his speech, which he said, there's evil in the world, and we're not going to be able to banish evil. We can try to protect from it, but I think just having some truth spoken like this, you can't always blame something on, our gun control laws are bad, or this person wasn't treated well. Sometimes a person is just set out to do an evil thing, and yes, we should try to protect ourselves from that, but you can't always fix that.
Yeah, I think this is a genuine conflict in worldviews, too.
Yeah.
I mean, that you believe in the fallen world of man, which I do very much so. I think this is why people come strongly in defense of Second Amendment. They believe that the only way to stop this evil sometimes is a good guy with a gun. And I don't think that that's just a cliche. There are a lot of people, especially on the left, who believe that somehow you can perfect the world of man, that we can stop all these things. You just pass enough laws, we can get rid of this. And honestly, I don't think that's true. And you can always apply these things to other things. I mean, if you say that the media has created this firestorm and has increased the number of attacks, why don't we have news control and crackdowns on the First Amendment, not just the Second Amendment? So, we're talking about an extreme violation of individuals' rights, and maybe the only ability people have in the future to stop violent incidents like this is with these good guys with the guns.
To protect themselves.
To protect themselves.
Right.
Why are we taking away people's rights at this time? And I think it's very cynical.
Well, and as Jenny, you point out in your point about the FBI, I mean, we also have seen this in the terrorist investigations as well, because people say, well, why didn't they do more? Why didn't somebody say something? Why didn't they saw this guy acting weird? This guy got expelled from another school, but was allowed to go then to another public school. And basically, we've learned they just took away his backpack. You can't care. It's almost as though they were afraid to actually truly discipline this guy, just like they're afraid to truly call out a terrorist because they might be Muslim background, and so the neighbors don't want to call because they'll be called bigots. I mean, I kind of feel like there's some of this underlying this too.
There is, and what caught my attention is one of the first interviews I watched after this horrific act happened. One of the students was saying that while in the classroom, they were all basically like, we guess it's this person. So they weren't surprised whatsoever, and that just goes to show you that this really could have been prevented.
All right. Thank you all for your comments on this story. We're going to move on to another story that got a lot of attention this week, and that is the email by former National Security Advisor under Obama, Susan Rice. We know what she said in the email, but here's what she said over a year ago when asked about this situation in the media. Take a look.
The President of the United States accused his predecessor, President Obama, of wiretapping Trump Tower during the campaign. Nothing of the sort occurred, and we've heard that confirmed by the director of the FBI, who also pointed out that no president, no White House can order the surveillance of another American citizen. That can only come from the Justice Department with the approval of a FISA court.
So that's what she said then. Now we've got an email out. Jarrett, is there any more clarity about what President Obama knew about the investigation, what his role was in the investigation? What do we know?
It is an additional piece of potential evidence that Obama did have knowledge that this investigation was going on and may have been an active participant. Of course, he has said, in past interviews while he was president that he had no involvement in the FBI investigation, that there was a clear line of a clear wall between himself and the FBI. This just opens up these questions, especially the very unusual circumstances under which Rice sent this email, which was 15 minutes after the inauguration of President Donald Trump, this email that she sent to herself. It looks very suspicious. I mean, that she's creating a kind of paper trail. Why is this happening? And I have to say,
how do you create a paper trail by emailing yourself? This is a part I mean, it's bizarre.
It is.
It is very bizarre, and look. I mean, I think there's a reason to not necessarily trust Rice because of her, past involvement in the Benghazi scandal, and saying that essentially that the Benghazi scandal was because of this video, and it turned out not to be true. So I think there's a reason not to trust. And the comment itself I found to be very strange, to say that, well, the president wants this done by the book. I mean, what other way is official matters done in the White House except for by the book and by the law? So I think it definitely continues to open up questions about the president's involvement in this whole matter.
Well, and she's got a couple days, basically, or maybe until next week, to answer the questions that the Senate investigators have put before.
Yeah, and hopefully she addresses this quickly, because this is extremely
She cleared all up for us.
Right. Let's just move on. There's a lot happening in the world. This is an easy fix. Let's just get all the facts out there and move on. But like Jared said, while this is bizarre, it's perhaps not unexpected when you look at how she handled Benghazi.
Speaking of bizarre, Pocahontas, also known as Elizabeth Warren, showed up at a Native American conference. Take a look at her remarks there.
I never used my family tree to get a break or get ahead. I never used it to advance my career.
Okay, so Jared, Senator Warren is trying to make amends, it would seem. This is my guess. She's definitely thinking of running for president, so she's trying to get this story behind her.
Yeah, I have to say, this actually really, it agitates me, because she's definitely, look, she's sending out these kind of,
smoke signals.
Smoke signals, as some people call them, yes, smoke signals. And, she's continuing to say that President Donald Trump's term for her, Pocahontas, is a slur on Native Americans, which is not true at all. It's an attack on her for claiming to have, for appropriating Native American heritage for political benefit, for potential personal gain. I mean, that's what's really offensive here. I mean, she's used this, and she continued to say in the speech that, well, that her parents, said that she had this heritage, and there's been no evidence at all that she is not on any tribal list, that she has any Native American heritage whatsoever. And to continue to use this in front of a group of Native Americans, I find to be very offensive. And that she's used essentially the media cover, which has not gone after her on this very serious
right, because, I mean, here's the thing. A lot of Americans probably have some sort of Native American. I have it in my family. Now, is my family on a tribal list? No, and I'm not using it to get hired. But that's the problem with what she did.
Yes.
Is she actually checked the box, like when she applied at Harvard, which very likely helped her get the position that she got there. And then additionally, the left is the one who runs around and talks about identity politics, and we shouldn't be claiming we're people we're not, or you can't prove it. Yeah. This is her.
She's done the definition of cultural appropriation, and it was for personal benefit, yet President Trump has gotten infinitely more criticism over giving her a nickname that is perhaps well-deserved.
Very well-deserved.
Well, and something else that, all she has to do is say, look, I got this story from my parents. We maybe were mistaken, I fessed up for that, but I continue to fight for these people that have been mistreated in our history. And that's all she has to say to clear this up. Instead, she doubles down, and I have to say, the media does not do a good job of going after her on this.
They do not. Well, another person who's been doubling down are many of the Democrats in Congress who talked about how the tax reform package is not helping people. And you will remember Nancy Pelosi famously called the bonuses people are getting just crumbs. Well, one Republican lawmaker is taking her to the mat on that. Watch this.
Versus the crumbs they're giving. I say crumbs.
You get the crumb, we get the banquet.
Crumbs, crumbs, crumbs.
So this is the comment that just won't go away for Nancy.
No, I'm sure she will regret this comment for the rest of her life, because these crumbs are now following her, perhaps into law. I think this is absolutely phenomenal. What they're trying to do is they want to make any bonuses given out from the GOP's tax reform plan, they want to make them tax-free. And I think that's absolutely incredible. And now they're going at it with Nancy Pelosi. They're calling it the Crumbs Act, and it stands for Creating Relief and Useful Middle-Class Benefits and Savings, aka crumbs. So this could go into law, be forever enshrined. I think this is wonderful.
I think it is pretty good too. What do you think, Jared?
Yeah,
what's the chances this gets through?
You know what? I think it does have a chance to get through. I mean, after all, why not give people a little extra money on top of the bonuses that they've already gotten? It just shows how crazy this narrative that these things are just crumbs, that these bonuses that are actually very significant for a lot of people who've gotten them. Fortunately, many people have. This just kind of adds a little sweetener to that and adds a little bonus to these bonuses that these people have already getting. I think it's great. I mean, how could you not want Americans who have gotten bonuses to get a little something extra?
And to actually keep the bonus they got.
Actually keep it.
All right, well, you mentioned how this is kind of crazy. This is really crazy. Joy Behar and what she said about Mike Pence due to his Christian faith, calling it basically a mental illness. Take a look at what she said and then, more importantly, his response.
I don't know if I want that.
It's one thing to talk to Jesus. It's another thing when Jesus talks to you.
Exactly. Okay, well, that's different. That's different.
That's called mental illness, if I'm not correct.
But I'm
hearing voices.
You know, Joy.
Mike, I'm a believer. Like tens of millions of Americans today will have ash on their foreheads to mark the beginning of Lent. Overwhelming majority of Americans cherish their faith. And we have all different types of faith in this country.
I thought this was so incredibly disrespectful. Mike Pence has gotten so much blowback for various things, but for her to attack him on his faith, on his Christian beliefs, I just thought it was a real low blow, and I thought it was super inappropriate. I think his response was so well done. I think he's one of the most incredibly articulate politicians we have. He's also incredibly diplomatic, like we've seen in North Korea, which we're going to get to later. I think that she should have definitely not made these comments, and I think she'll regret them.
And it was offensive, Jarrett, not just to Mike Pence, but there are a lot of people that believe very similarly to what Mike Pence, and specifically what she attacked. For those of you who probably don't watch The View, I hope you don't, because I think it's a terrible piece of television. But what she specifically said on the show was that, it's not weird when Mike Pence says that he talks to Jesus. What's weird is when Mike Pence thinks Jesus talks to him. Which says she knows very little about Christianity, which is about a personal relationship with Jesus, which would mean you have a two-way conversation. She's just nuts.
Actually, this is very increasingly common is that people who are Christians and things like that are almost like an alien species, especially people who are in the elite media who, they don't know very many Christians. They don't really understand what, people of faith, understand about their views. So they treat them as if they're, aliens from Mars or something, that this is so bizarre. They can't quite understand. What Pence was saying, I think, is a very common view amongst many Christians. Maybe even people she knows, she just doesn't realize that they have these views. So yeah, it's very offensive to people. And, it's incredible that you would say to liken it to a mental illness of some kind of things. Some of our founding fathers believed that God was speaking to them when they created our country. Were they suffering from mental illnesses? I think it's a very offensive thing to say.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if there's any further blowback on this. But The View, boy, every day they say something offensive. How Meghan McCain does that show, I don't know. Power to her. All right, let's talk about the Olympics and another issue kind of along these lines. There's an Olympic skater, so I'm sure you've been watching, who's saying if the Team USA comes to the White House, which I'm sure they'll get invited, he is going to boycott it. Watch this.
When the Olympics are over, would you sit down with Mike Pence and what would you say to him?
You know what? I personally don't have anything to say to Mike Pence. I'm very lucky because legislation that he's pushed hasn't affected my life at all. I spoke out because there are people out there whose legislation, whose lives have been affected by change that he's tried to make. And so I spoke out for them because right now I have a voice, and I think it's really important for me to use it.
So this young man, we were just talking while that was playing, I find him very annoying. He's no doubtly talented, but this guy loves the camera. I mean, it is about, they all have personal stories, but this guy it's unbelievable. Anyway, carry on. But he loves the camera, but he doesn't love the White House, so he's wanting to make a political statement.
Right, and he's made that very clear. His interviews are hilarious, slightly annoying, so we're going to keep following this. But basically, Adam Rippon is one of the first openly gay athletes to compete for the U.S. at the Olympics. So before the Olympics even got started, basically, he got into this sort of tug-of-war with Vice President Pence about Vice President Pence's former statements. It got kind of messy, and I thought it was unfortunate because it took the spotlight off of these American athletes who train and sacrifice to represent us. Now, to Adam's credit, either a great PR person or a wonderful agent got to him because he did release a statement saying that he no longer wants to discuss it. He doesn't want his Olympic experience or the experience of his colleagues and teammates there to be overshadowed by that. So whether or not this was his idea, I do think that's the right direction. We've already seen with the North Korea obsession and infatuation that our media has with them, we don't need our athletes overshadowed by these kind of ridiculous tangents.
Right. I mean, and his personal life, not Vice President Pence back here, but the skater, I mean, fine. But why does, and I'm glad that he's gone this direction, but I mean, they really have tried to make this a political move.
Absolutely.
Or use a platform for politics.
And especially, I think we're seeing this to an increasing extent. Athletes saying, well, I wouldn't shake the president's or vice president's hand.
Super Bowl athletes.
Right, Super Bowl athletes. I got to say, when my parents may not remember this, when I was a little boy, I think I was 5 years old, I said, I wouldn't shake the president at the time's hand. He's terrible. And my parents said, no, they didn't like the president either. They said, you shake the president's hand. You have respect for the office of the president of the United States. And that applies to the vice president as well. It's hard to see so many people disrespecting, not just the man, but the office itself in this sense.
And the Olympics are going to find themselves in the same place that you see the NFL, which is people like, I didn't tune into this to watch your political statement or to follow you on Twitter I thought I want to see you skate or ski or whatever the sport happens to be. But if you turn into politics and these kind of statements, people are going to tune out. And I think the numbers are down.
They are. And it's interesting that you mentioned respecting the office of the vice president. We interviewed Armstrong Williams earlier this week, and it just was released. And he talked about, in the context of the NFL and the Olympics, it's important to respect the office.
Indeed. All right, well, let's take a look at the story about North Korea, or talk about it. The media, as you know, was just captivated by Kim Jong-il's sister being in attendance there at the games. Jared, this seemed quite inappropriate.
Yeah, I've written a little bit about this too, and it's amazing that the media that have said, well, we shouldn't normalize President Donald Trump. He's some extreme threat. That they've tried to normalize this person who is the sister of a dictator and a tyrant. I mean, by all means, I believe that North Korea is the most tyrannical regime on earth at this time. There's an argument
her
that
title is like chief propagandist.
She's a propagandist, which of course the media played right into that and basically produced propaganda for the regime to try to make him seem like, she's just this cool character, whatnot. Well, she's not a cool character. She's actually the head of a ruthlessly dictatorial regime, and there was some media that says, well, Vice President Pence, brought down the country because he met with some dissidents and things like this, using a senior source that was close to North Korea. It's like, this is very embarrassing for American media, which has done so much to run so many negative stories on our own president, in a free country in which they can say these things, trying to puff up a tyrannical regime where you don't have the freedom of anything. I mean, these people are living in darkness. So it sickens me to see the American media lap this up so quickly.
Yeah. Jenny, your thoughts?
She should have never been given the platform that she was given. It gave them exactly what they want, like y'all pointed out. She's the head of their propaganda. That's how their regime gets oxygen. That's how they validate what they're doing. And it just never should have happened.
Well, we'll see how this continues to play out post-Olympics as well, because that will be where the rubber, so to speak, hits the road. All right, another story here. Benjamin Netanyahu, leader in Israel, is being accused of corruption, but he is denying it.
After I read the recommendation report, I can say it is biased, extreme, full of holes, like Swiss cheese.
So, how serious do you all think this is, Jarrett? What do you think?
It is a little hard to say because, of course, these charges have been brought up many times before with Netanyahu, and they've been proven to not be true. The charges have been dropped. And certainly he said that none of this is true. He's been very emphatic. He's not stepping down from office. He's going to be fighting this. So, yeah, I mean, there are obviously some very big accusations of bribery and corruption, things like that. But I don't know if there's enough evidence right now to say, well, he's absolutely guilty of doing these things. And I think there are a lot of forces in Israel that would like to see him gone. So it's possible there's political motivation. It's possible there's something deeper to this. And I think, we'll see through a full investigation what comes through with this.
Yeah, he seems pretty calm about it, though, as though like, you guys don't have the goods. I mean,
right.
and I noticed if you read the New York Times story on this, he talks about, and I was in Israel less than a year ago, and he's right that their media is definitely left, very similar to here. Their courts are very judicially activist, similar to some of ours. And the reality is, even outside of his own base, people do think he's been pretty strong at keeping Israel safe. And I think that gives him a stronger, not just his base, but the other political parties. There's nobody else doing that they think can step in and do that.
Right. I mean, he's been the definition of cool, calm, and collected throughout this whole thing. I think his statement even mentioned that the allegations are like Swiss cheese, they're full of holes. And like you said, he's done a lot of good for Israel, and our relationship has been very strong with him as well. So it would be unfortunate to see him go down.
Well, we'll follow this story as well. All right, our final story, one of the top ones of the week. High school students in California have decided they want to ban the national anthem from being played at their school's events.
This is what we're dealing with. So they have a student advisor, and you heard Dennis reference the student advisor, and she actually defended the banning of the national anthem, said the national anthem is problematic and should have been removed. So this is just great. So now we have a teacher encouraging young people to disrespect American values and traditions in a public school classroom. This is unacceptable and inexcusable, ladies and gentlemen.
So it seems these folks just discovered that the national anthem has several verses, even though we usually only sing the first one. What do you make of this story?
I think this is PC culture just snowballing, and it's getting out of control. Basically, they want to ban the national anthem because they have deemed it racially insensitive. I think this is extremely dangerous. Now, if they want to do that, that's fine. I think an interesting aspect to the story is that not only conservatives are upset about this, but so are liberals and people all across the political spectrum, because this song is the backbone of a lot of what we do. It's very representative of our culture, of our freedom. So I think you have to be very careful with this.
Jared, you've been a resident historian for us. Is the song racist?
No, not at all. The third stanza, which is not sung normally in the national anthem, is one that historians have debated. There is a line that says that we will defeat the hireling and the slave. But it's unclear what he means by slave. At the time, slave could just mean a mercenary or somebody who lives under a monarchy, which would apply to the British. So the line itself is very ambiguous. There's no clear-cut answer to what exactly Francis Scott Key meant by this. And frankly, the attacks that are coming, that this is just, asking for genocide, things like that, are crazy. And I have to say, to torpedo this song and get rid of it now really is political correctness just out of control.
Well, hopefully this stops at the borders of this school. Thank you both very much for being with us. Thank you all for joining us as well. We hope you have a great Washington and Lincoln birthday weekend, right? Not just President's Day. We're celebrating the birthdays. Thanks, everybody, for being with us. We'll see you back here next week.